Hello, this video is a demonstration of how you can use Fire Family Plus to create summaries of weather for an area over a year or a portion of time. This is going to start after you've already downloaded the FW13 files that you can download from a variety of sites. You can learn more about that by looking at the How to Use Fire Family Plus document that's on sparkedresources.weebly.com. To begin, you first need to import, first you need to start your Fire Family Plus project. So you would go to, when you open Fire Family Plus for the first time, which you can download for free from the government, you will go to File and New, and you would name your project. I've already named one, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Once you have your working set open, you are going to import your data. Data, import, select FW13 files, and you can, I have two different RAWS stations here, and so I can just select both of them and import them, and it'll take several minutes to import all the data. Now that it's imported, I can go to my drop-down menu for SIGs or stations and select potlatch, so I'd select shock in my case, and I have data ranging from 2003, so I will analyze the whole range of data. When you are looking at data patterns, it sometimes is interesting to select less years to see if there's a difference in the more recent years. That might be informative since we do want to look at the past to see if we can understand what's going to happen in the future. Because we're doing an analysis over a year, it's useful to change your analysis period to 4 days instead of 1 day. It makes it look a little bit less noisy. Here's your station information. There might be some interesting information here regarding the site that this RAW station exists on. This is useful so that you can compare it to the site that you are predicting the weather for. Now that I have myself set up here, I'm going to start to produce some reports. I am going to click on this Climatology Reports tool. Takes you to the same place as the Weather Climatology option. And I'm going to create some stats graphs. So I'm going to put check boxes on values that I'm interested in creating figures for. Yours may be in a different order than mine. That's fine. So I'm interested in creating two tables with two merged tables. One with burning index, dry bulb, and relative humidity, and the other with my fuel moistures. So I put an X on each of those and I select Run. I'd like to be able to see all of these things, which is useful. So I'm going to go to Windows, Tile Horizontal, and that lays them all out. And you might notice that I have a pink line here that you won't have yet. That is what's called an overlay, and that's the overlay for this year. So to create an overlay, I go to Options, Overlays, and from this drop-down arrow, first you have to select New, and then the drop-down arrow, and you select which year you'd like to overlay. This can be useful to do, you can set up several years, and just shows you where that year is in comparison to what the average weather conditions have been like. In order to create a merged figure, which is really useful to not have so many figures, I'm going to go to Options and Merge, and you're only able to merge figures that you already have graphs created for. So my first merged figure is going to be temp, RH, and burning index. And I can change my colors here, and I can also change the width of these lines, which is helpful since they are automatically relatively skinny. And I'll scroll down here and select average and then click OK. Here is a merged graph that's showing those three variables all together, which is a nice consolidated way to look at the information. This tells you a lot about certainly the peaks and troughs of weather throughout the year, also the length, the general length of time that these are, for example, the relative humidities are low is a pretty distinct period of time. And every area that you would make a graph for would have a slightly different distribution of information. So now let's make a merged graph with R1, 10, 100, and 1,000. Oops. And you, of course, want to change the color and the width of that 1,000-hour fuel. And select average. And now we have a nice graph here that shows how those change throughout the year. Another important piece of information when summarizing weather for an area is the winds. I'm going to go to Windows, Close All, Reports and Graphs. That brings me back to my basics. And now I'm going to go to Weather and Winds. Winds are something that vary quite a lot depending on where the raw station is located. So to begin with, I'm going to create all of these figures. So I'm just going to leave them all checked and click OK. Got a lot of figures here. I'll go to Options or Windows, Tile Horizontal again, and I'll close these two tables out, and I'm going to tile horizontal again so that I can have them a little bit larger. And I'll just scroll up a little bit so I can see each one. What I'm looking for here are general patterns that I'm observing in the winds based on the time of day. Typically, places have a time when wind shifts from one direction to the other, and that's important when you're managing fires so that you can know what you might expect at certain times of the day. That shift typically happens in the morning and in the evening. So what I'm first going to look at is all hours combined, so you can see that we've got a couple different predominant directions here. And when I start to look more closely at these, what I see emerge is a pattern of winds. Let's see, we've got 2000 to 23. It looks like it's predominantly coming from the southeast. And so let's see as the night progresses. Later in the night, still coming from the southeast, and in the early morning hours, southeast. And as we start to get around 8 o'clock, it's starting to shift toward the northwest. And as we start to warm up during the day, we got more stronger winds from the northwest, and they're faster. These larger bars are faster winds. And 1600 to 1900 again from the west to northwest. So we're starting to see a pattern emerge from our winds here. So instead of including all of these figures in a report, what we would like to do now is close all of these reports, go to Weather, Winds, and turn on just the daytime, or just the nighttime winds. I'm going to uncheck, split this into individual windrows graphs, and click OK. Close my tables. And now I have a windrows that's just for the nighttime. I'll do that same thing with, I'll close this, and I'll go to Weather, Wind, and I'll do the same thing, but for the daytime values. Turn off all the nighttime values, uncheck this, and now I have a figure that's my daytime values. Another feature that's useful for prescribed fire planning is the Event Locator tool. For the Event Locator, when you have a prescription in your burn plan, for example, here's an example prescription, we are assuming that these conditions exist at one time, but sometimes we might create a prescription that might not actually ever happen on our unit, which means that we need to adjust our prescription. To see when in the past we've had days that have met our prescription and understand how likely it is that we might have those in the future, we use the event locator. So this, as an example, I open the event locator and I'm going to add a row. And I'm going to start with my 1 hour fuels. 1 hour fuels, and we will say the maximum, you'll see where I'm going here in a second, the maximum is less than or equal to 16, and it's a value. I'm telling it that don't select any weather observations where the 1 hour fuel moisture was greater than 16. So now I'm going to add my operator and 1 hour fuel moisture, minimum is greater than or equal to 8, also a value. So I've taken this prescription parameter, which is, in this example, our burn plan says we can't burn when things are drier than 8 or things are wetter than 16. How many days in the last 15 years have met that parameter? When we add all of these different parameters together, we end up with very few days that have met all of these conditions. Now that's with the stipulation that this raw station might not be perfect for our site. It might not be totally accurate even, perhaps with what we believe about fuel moisture, but it does give us an idea about how broad or how narrow our prescription is and what we might need to do to adjust that. So a final process that we'll cover is the analysis of the Nelson fuel moistures. This is version 4.2 of Fire Family Plus, which does not include the Nelson fuel moisture calculations in the fuel moistures. The fuel moistures are calculated using the NFDRS calculations. So in order to get fuel moistures using the Nelson values, we need to export them into Excel and have some fun in Excel. So we'll go to weather, hourly data analysis, Nelson dead fuel moistures, and hourly values. And something to pay attention to here is that if you've changed these year ranges or these annual filters, you are also going to just have that data selected when you download it. So if you would like the full extent of time, then make sure that you change your years here. So I've got my report. I'm going to go to File, Save As, and that's because this is the active window, it's going to know that I want to save that report. And I'm just going to call this Shock Nelson Text, and I've already made that, but I'm going to replace it. And I'm going to open a blank Excel workbook and go to File, Open, Browse, and in the folder that I saved it, I'm going to make sure that I have all files selected so that I can see these text files. Select Open. And it takes the text file and it tries to understand it, but I need to give it a little bit of a tip. So I need to say, notice this is a preview here. When I scroll down to the data, it doesn't have those lines, any lines between it, so I need to click space, and that will separate it out. And click Next and Finish. So I don't need any of this station information, so I'm going to delete that for now. This is a lot of data, lots and lots of data, and we need some way to summarize it quickly. And that's what pivot tables are all about. So I'm going to put my cursor right here. I'm on L2, just somewhere next to this table. I'm going to go to Insert, Pivot Table, and tell it the data range that I'm interested in. So I'll highlight these columns, and select OK. And now I need to give it some directions. What is my pivot table going to look at? So first I want to organize it by date, and I don't need year and quarter, so I'm going to remove year and quarter. And I'm also interested in my 1 and 10 hour fuels. 100 and 1,000 hour fuels, not really that great or not that useful in the Nelson fuel moisture calculation. So I've got some of 1 hours and some of 10. That's not useful. So I'm going to go to value field setting and change it to average, and average of 10 hour. My purpose here is to create a figure similar to what we've already created in Fire Family Plus using the NFDRS fuel moisture values for the year. So I want to summarize it that way. So I need to change some of the way that this is displayed. Now, working with a pivot table, the reason that it's a little tricky is that the options that are available to you depend on what you've got selected. So I'm just going to go ahead and click down here and go to, and I'm going to click on one cell here. So notice I don't have a whole row highlighted. I have a cell highlighted. And now I have the option to ungroup, first of all, and then to group field. If you don't have the option to group field, that means you aren't selecting just one cell. So group field. And I'm going to change it from months to days. Take off months, turn on days, and select OK. What this has done is it says, now it's looking at every January 1st for the last 15 years. What's the average 1 hour fuel moisture? Instead of having it broken out by year, from year to year. This is the data I'm interested in. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of this data. Sometimes it's just easier to go to the bottom and scroll up. It's best to copy and paste things out of a pivot table when working with it to create figures. So label my columns, date, 1 hour, 10 hour. Now I'm also going to then highlight these columns. It wasn't working for me to highlight the rows or the whole column, so I'm just dragging it. So I'm dragging it down through all the information. And now we'll go to Insert, Line Graph. Now I have some information about the average 1 hour and 10 hour fuel moistures throughout the year. Because this isn't created by Fire Family Plus, I don't have a conveniently titled figure, so it is important to create something that's informative. 2003 to 2018. So another feature that we might find interesting if we are analyzing the weather for a specific month, let's say the month that you typically prescribe burn-in, is the patterns of fuel moisture over from hour to hour. To get this, you could try and manipulate your already created pivot table. I have found that to be problematic because it seems to carry over different settings, so I'm just going to create a new one. Putting my cursor somewhere that's got enough space, and I'll go to Insert, Pivot Table, select my data range again, and OK. We'll turn on our variables, year and time, and then 1 hour and 10 hour fuels. Change this to average. First I'm going to ungroup and then go to group selection and select months and hours. Now I have by month the different fuel moistures by time. So I'm going to scroll down to October and I'm going to copy and paste these times and values and put them next to the table. Now, if you are not able to get your pivot table to look like that, try a couple different ways, and if not, then you can ask for help. So again, we've made our table, we ungrouped it, and then we went to group selection and selected months and hours. So let's add our labels. Time, 1 hour, 10 hour, highlight, insert line graph, and I have the information that I'm looking for. So generally, what does this pattern look like? How much does it vary from 1 hour to the next throughout the day? Making sure, of course, to label your table. Shock, October, something, whatever you want to put in there. So there are many other features you can use in Fire Family Plus that were not covered here, but this should give you a little bit of a taste of how you can summarize the weather for an area and understand what might happen in the future based on what has happened in the past.